Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Intermission, the place where two film students discuss classic, iconic, and obscure films from times gone by. I am one of those film students, Oscar W. Fitchett. So recently, I've been looking at my DVD and Blu-Ray shelf, and I've been looking at the box sets that I own. And I've wanted to try to get through some directors that I've been meaning to get through for years now. This time I thought, you know what, I wanted to give a go at going through, you can see it in the title, HIROKAZU KORE-EDA, a Japanese filmmaker that I want to watch more of. And so I already started actually watching some of his films from this box set, the Of Flesh and Blood box set by BFI. Because usually the Intermission podcast is very much so, I've already seen the film and Robbie hasn't. This time around, I kind of want to watch some films that I haven't seen and that aren't current and new. So through this marathon video, we are going to be going through the entirety of the box set, as I mentioned, Of Flesh and Blood by BFI, which includes the films Maborosi, Afterlife, Nobody Knows, and Still Walking. However, we're not just stopping at the Of Flesh and Blood, the cinema of HIROKAZU KORE-EDA. We're not stopping at that, because after this box set, we will then be going on to Like Father, Like Son, which I haven't seen, as well as Shoplifters, which I have seen, but only once, and in 2018, and I want to revisit this film, having hindsight of his other films. We're going to be going through these films, and the very first one we will be starting with will be Maborosi. I am now a few days removed from watching Maborosi for the very first time. Maborosi being Kore-Eda's feature film debut, released in 1995. And going into the film, I knew absolutely nothing, which is how I'm doing all of these films. I'm going into all of these films knowing nothing about them other than it's Kore-Eda. And that's it, really. The film was starting, and I just assumed, I don't know, in my head I thought myself, is this going to be kind of like a live-action Ghibli film? And I mean more so somewhere along the lines of Only Yesterday, where it's kind of like calm, slice-of-life-esque type of thing. But it's not that at all. And again, spoilers for the film, I did not expect this to be a film about grief, and this is a very powerful film about grief. And the scene that's always going to stick out in my mind with this film, and a scene that I think is just I knew as I was watching, I was like, man, chills right there and there. And it's the scene of when I forgot the lead character's name, but the main character, the actress, she's watching her husband walk away for the final time, but she doesn't know it's the final time at that point. And and he leaves the bike there, and it's such a beautiful shot. And it's like he's walking down the tunnel, and you just hear the keychain, the bell, and she stood there smiling. And then it cuts to him just walking, and I just was like, God, that's powerful. And in my head, I'm like, he's going to die now. But I wasn't thinking that in a sense of like, I'm calling it now. This is predictable BS. I was watching it and I was saying to myself, that's a really powerful way to signify the loss of someone. It truly captures the essence of thinking of a moment of being like, what if that is the last time you're going to see a loved one? What if this is the last moment, but you don't know, but you kind of have but you have like a feeling in yourself where it's like, if that is the last moment, that is a very beautiful moment of knowing that person. And it was a beautiful scene. It was a beautifully done shot. And I know I'm talking loads about this one individual shot, but I think that one individual scene truly captures the essence of Maborosi. I briefly touched upon it there with that one scene, but the cinematography in this film is right up my alley, in a sense. And it's nothing like, it's not like a big Roger Deakins or Emmanuel Lubezki where it's these big, like, gorgeously sweeping shots, but it's I guess, like, if I had to compare it to a cinematographer, I think it's more along the lines of, you see, even there, it's not even that. It's a really tranquil experience watching this. And again, for the first, like, bit before the death of the husband, it is very nice slice of lifey. And it brings you really, really into the feeling of, like, life, but the calmness of certain life and the calmness of certain mundanity of it. Like the moment of when she just goes to see him in the garage and she's just peeking through and then he's there. Which, beautiful callback, by the way, where I'll get to the scene anyway. I'm jumping ahead of myself. But, like, where she's, like, you know, waiting for him outside the work. They go to a cafe and it's just, you know, nice and chatting. And then they're riding the bike home. That's what this film does beautifully, is long takes. And I don't even mean, they're not like tracking shots. They're just long takes. Like the moment, like what I was about to mention there of at the moment before the husband dies, when the main two characters are just riding the bike back home at night. It's a side profile shot that's just following them. So it's a tracking shot in the sense of they're moving with the bicycle, but they are very much so like the camera's moving with the bicycle. But it's not like this really complicated shot where the camera's then swooping around behind them, or it's just like just following them from a side profile view, and they're just talking. It's almost like we're just kind of watching this, like we're just kind of like observing a life happen. And I think what this film does beautifully is once we get almost that warmth of feeling like, oh, this nice little slice of life moment, and then as soon as the husband died, as soon as we find out the husband was killed, assuming suicide, there's nothing change. The visual style doesn't change at all. It still stays the same type of color palette. Maybe a little bit darker, like not as bright. I think that's probably like the most like visual change. But nothing changes other than the story structure of she's now a widow with an infant child. And then you just feel the coldness. It's a cold color palette anyway. And I mean, is the one shot, which again sums up every, like, that one shot there. It's a gorgeous shot. It's very early on in terms of her finding out that her husband has died. It's on her way to the police station, and it's a gorgeously done shot. Brilliant usage of the rain and the darkness. It's a magnificently lit film. The film isn't a short film. It isn't a long film. It's like an hour and 49, so an average length for the film. But if I had explained to you all like what happened in the film, I can't really say much happened in the film, which is a thing that I can imagine a lot of people might be like, God, what a boring film this is. But I think what this film does wonders is really soaking up the atmosphere. And again, we spend that early part of the film with this couple, and they're sat there, they're talking, they're in a cafe, they're talking, they're riding a bike and talking, there's not really a quiet moment between the two people, between the couple. And then when he dies, and then this woman is left on her own, all the tasks that we saw her do in complete, like by herself, in silence, basically, is heartbreaking. And it's haunting, almost. There's one moment where she goes back into the city to see her mother, just to pay a visit to her mother. And she revisits these locations. Like, she goes back to looking through the window of the garage of where he worked, which is one of my favourite moments in the film, because it's the exact same framing, but with an empty garage. And it's so beautifully symbolic. And then she goes to the cafe bar, where we saw the two of them, and she's talking to the barman, who was also there in the previous scene. And Kore-eda does something wonderful in the sense, like, he again keeps the same type of framing, where she is on the right side of the frame, the barman is in the center of the frame, and on the left side of the frame of where her husband was in the previous scene is just an empty chair. And it's not like brought attention to, but you are aware of the absence of space. And that's the thing, I can't recall many close-ups in this film apart from this one shot, which I think is one of the only close-ups in this film. Kore-eda shoots this wide, which can maybe sometimes be, which can maybe be let me try that again, which can maybe be a detriment to a film, just keeping mainly wide shots. But I think within a film like this, and a film about grief, and a story about grief, you need the wide shots to almost feel the space and feel the absence to us. Like, to us as a viewer, we're watching the frame and being like, wow, there's a lot of, like, she's, like, very distant and very, like, small in the frame, or, like, she's not very clear, and there's just a lot of nothing. But that's how grief feels. Grief feels like you're small in a large world, alone. We don't need to see this new widow in every scene crying, bawling her eyes out, just destroyed, and just in an absolute, like, emotional state. We don't need to see that because we can feel it. But also, that's not what grief is all the time to people. And plus, this film doesn't take place in a small period of time. This takes place over years. Like, we see the infant child, and then we cut to, like, when he's, like, I want to say 5, 6 maybe. So we're a good few years ahead after the death of her husband. So, you know, and she's moved to a coastal town. She's remarried. And there's moments where she's happy. And she's enjoying life. Because she's moved on. But she still feels this absence and this, like, separation. And she's got this question. Which, man, when you feel lost and you have questions about that loss, that hurts. It really hurts. The main question in her head is, like, why did he kill himself? And there's no moment where someone goes, yeah, he was really down in the dumps. Yeah, I saw him. He said this. He left this suicide note. No, like, when she goes to the bar and cafe, or the bar place, and when the barman's like, yeah, he just seemed fine. And this was very soon before he would have went to the train tracks. And he was happy. He was just his normal self. And that's what I like a lot about it. Because this film, it's not a happy film, but it's not a depressing film either, I don't think. It's a calm look at depression and grief and how to handle sadness. But the point I was trying to get, like, because I was saying, like, I'm glad that there's no moment of her just constantly crying and constantly, like, breaking down in an emotional state. But she still has these questions in her head of, like, why did he kill himself? Why did he do this? I thought we were happy. But again, she's not constantly in this emotional rut and emotional state until the final scene, the penultimate scene, which, if you're thinking to yourself, right, this is the big emotional scene where she's crying, we need close-ups. We need to get all that emotion. And sometimes sometimes you do. Sometimes you need that in an acting performance. No, Kore-eda doesn't get close up to her. This is the widest shot of the film. And we just hear her crying and breaking down and being like, why did he kill him? That's the only moment that we really truly see her break down. And again, we don't see a close-up on her face. We don't see that money shot. We just have a big wide. And somehow that's much more profound, I think, than if Kore-eda chose a close-up. I don't think this film needed close-ups. I think what really makes this film pop as well is the location, the environment that they use, both in the city and the small coastal town. When I'm watching Japanese films, I don't usually see locations that I'm like, oh, this reminds me of home. It just doesn't. Like, because obviously there's no location. Obviously, I live in a coastal town, and there's not many places that they show in Japan like that. It's either Tokyo, like the city, or the or like Kyoto or Okinawa, where it's like all like trees and very green. You don't really see coastal, like small coastal towns. But this really shines a light on that type of area, which I haven't seen in a Japanese film. And so it had this really interesting blend to me, personally, of like feeling like, ooh, this feels familiar to me. But all while still having a very authentically Japanese feel and aesthetic to it. I can't explain it. You just have to see it. Again, I love the fact how Kore-eda just lets the location be the beating heart of this film as well. Like there's that one shot. Again, I'm saying there's that one shot, but there's so many good shots. But there's that one shot where the two children are just running along running along a hill bit, and it's just them and the reflection. I'll put it on the screen. You can see it now. But it's such a gorgeous shot. It's weird. With this film, Kore-eda has made a very interesting blend of calm and tranquility mixed with sadness and depression. And it's a film... when I first watched the film, I gave it 4.5 stars. I'm keeping it at 4.5 stars now, but the more I'm thinking about it and the more it's sticking with me, it's sticking with me so much. And the more I'm thinking about it, and I will rewatch this again at some point, I could see this being a 5-star film for me. And I thought, is this just going to be like Kore-eda's debut film? That's okay, but it gets better as it goes on. But Maborosi, man. Yeah, at the minute, my favorite Kore-eda film. And that's where I'm going to end it with Maborosi. It's amazing. I adore the film. And I'm going to move on. And the next film I will discuss is Afterlife. So like Maborosi, I'm a few days removed from watching Afterlife. 2 days removed from watching Afterlife for the very first time. And this is Kore-eda's second feature film. My assumption of Kore-eda is very much so like, he's the modern day Ozu. And already with Afterlife, he's doing something that Ozu hasn't done, which is dealing with something of the supernatural? Spiritual. I'll say spiritual, not supernatural. The spiritual. Afterlife is a film like Maborosi for me in the sense of like, I watched it once, had an opinion about it, and already within time it's kind of growing. It's a film that deals with the concept I'm very interested in, which is death. And more so like what you want and memories of life. And specifically, what is the only memory you want to have from your entire life? What memory do you want to take with you to the afterlife? And how Kore-eda deals with that topic is in such an interesting concept that I'm surprised I haven't seen this type of thing done before. The film takes place in almost this limbo of like in between life and death, and you know the people who have recently died go to this place, and it's like, you have a certain amount of time to think about the one memory you want that you want to take with you into the afterlife, and we're going to make that as with movie magic, which again is so fascinating and so like unique to me, and it baffles me that it is this unique. And one thing I've learned about Kore-eda going into this marathon is that he came from a documentary background. And I'm learning about that. And I'm learning that fact about a lot of certain directors that I am fans of. And that is very apparent with Afterlife, because a lot of the film, and the one thing I notice is very much so like from a talking head point of view, like an interview, as if you were doing a talking head interview where when the people who have died are talking about their memories, he's shooting it from not too dissimilar of an angle to this, where it's just, again, just someone like as if they're getting interviewed almost, and they're just answering a question. And I find it and it works really effectively, because again, it's a format we all know when we're watching something non-fiction. So we're associating that type of camera angle and that type of vocabulary of how they're talking about, where they're just talking about their life, and they're just as if these people are just answering questions, and we just associate that visually with like, oh, I am learning a factual thing about this non-fiction person. And it also helps that the setting isn't this extravagant thing. It's just a worn-down warehouse almost, which I think has a lovely charm to it. Some people might look at that aspect and be like, that's a bit dingy, that's a bit unappealing. I don't know, I find the location and the set of this film, it's an odd sense of warmth. I have no idea, even though, again, it's a pretty cold colour palette. Again, that's one thing I'm learning about Kore-eda. He likes his cool colour palettes, which could equate to either sadness or depression, or it could also equate to peacefulness and tranquility, which I think he might be going for with all his films, like a sense of melancholy, but also evoking an emotion of calm and relax, which I never thought about until just saying it there. But the two films Maborosi and now Afterlife, they do have a sense of like sadness, melancholy, cold, but it also has like a sense of like at peace, contempt, like calm. We're watching these talking head things that we associate with non-fiction, interview, documentary, and we're learning this information about people that have died, and it's just and I think that brings the audience into that thought process a bit more seamlessly, because this film, like this premise, could have been done in a very much more like if Wes Anderson, for example, directed this type of concept, it would be very plucked from reality and very like we're watching a storybook and we're watching a fairy. Of Guillermo del Toro, that's a better example. If Guillermo del Toro did this concept, it would be very like stylish and very gothic almost, and very like adult fairy tale, and very like whimsy, but also a bit creepy. But since this concept was done in a much more naturalistic way, it kind of brought me as an audience member into the concept a bit more naturally. Like this felt like almost like I was watching like, this is what happens when I die. This is what happens when I die. When I die, I am going to go to this location and I'm going to get asked, what memory do you want? And I'm almost watching this like, okay, they would choose something from like their child, like from when they're like pre-teens. This one will choose something from when they're like in their 20s. This one will choose something when they're like this age. Like, so I'm thinking to myself, like, if I were to die right now, morbid, I know, but if I were to die right now at age 26, within the 26 years of my life, what is the one memory that I would want to live with? And through that, I then started thinking about those memories. I'm like, what like memories that I would want to, what are the memories that I would want to take with me to the afterlife? And I thought of a memory, and I thought of a situation. I thought, man, yeah, I would love to take that memory. And I thought about that from watching this film, from watching Afterlife, and yeah, man, you know what? I'm probably this is probably gonna go up a bit of a rating. Actually, this is like Yeah. I think it's like, because with this film, I was watching this film, just kind of like going through it, and I wasn't like, wow. Like with Maborosi, I was feeling the weight and the gravitas of the story of Maborosi. Even though it was quite a calmly executed film, Maborosi, I was feeling like the grief. With Afterlife, I wasn't like feeling like, wow, this is insanely like heavy. But I was watching Afterlife, and I was like, just going through it. But now thinking about it in hindsight, 2 days removed from the film, I do feel very much so like that's the point. The film isn't meant to be this. Do you feel this? The weight and gravitas of the concept I'm dealing with right now. It's almost like, because that can be a very heavy topic. Death and being dead. And what are you going to take with you now that you are dead? What are you going to take from your life that you have lived into the afterlife now that you are dead? That's a weighty subject. If I just casually brought that up, I'll go, Jesus Christ, Oscar, that's a bit. But like, this film doesn't execute or handle that topic in a way of like, look at how important, how heavy and how deep this topic is. It's almost like, okay, let's all go through this. And Kore-eda almost like calmly takes us through this. And we watch multiple people, and that's the other thing, because for the first, like, that was the thing that, just hit me majorly, was for the first bit we saw, a good few people that were getting told about the situation of this afterlife situation. We're all elderly people, and you're like, okay, yep. And then it gets like people where it's like, people in their 20s. I'm like, like, they didn't need to do anything. Like, they just showed like a young person sat in the chair being told what they need to do. And a simple cut like that, again, the editing, man. And Kore-eda edits, and that's another thing I found out. Kore-eda edits his films. He definitely has his stamp on his films that he makes. But again, that simple cut of like old person, cut, young person, younger person, and it's like, oh yeah, because we all associate death with like being elderly, like for the most part. But this film shows a multitude of people where it's like, yeah, and then to me at least, I was reminded, oh yeah, I loved how, because I was thinking to myself, oh, is this just gonna be multiple characters? But then it becomes almost a story about this one character, and I forgot his name. But man, his character arc is something else. It really is something else. First of all, he's 22 years old, but he was born in 28? He was born in the 20s, but he died at 22 in the war. And then he eventually decides that because the staff members in this facility obviously are all deceased people who didn't choose a memory or couldn't choose a memory, so they just kind of like, now they have to work in this place. But after so long, after him talking with an older man, Watanabe, who he also finds out Watanabe married his widow, he then decides that he has a memory that he wants to take with him to the afterlife. And I thought to myself, oh, is it going to be a memory of like him sat at the bench with his wife? But no, he chooses a memory of him sat alone on a bench, because that's the moment that he felt like, that was the first moment that he felt that he could like really knew. He truly found himself. And yeah, I don't know. Words can't describe that. And it's like, then he watches the film, and it's a beautiful cut, because we don't see, like, we see all the dead people, or the people sitting in the cinema, in the movie theater, getting ready to watch their films, their memories, the memories that they're going to take with them forever. But then we don't, lights go down, then we don't see what happens after that. So then we see our guy that we've been watching through the entire film sat, and then we see the film, and then the lights come up in the cinema, and then there's just an empty chair where he was. It's not like, watch the film, now off you go. It's like they watch the film, and then it's like, and that's it. And then that's the memory they've got, and now they're in the afterlife. It's such a profound thing to me, and it's so powerful. But it's done in such a subtle way. Again, we're talking about edits. This is one of my favorite uses of it, of the edit. Obviously, the talking head shot, I'm going to call it, that I discussed about, that Kore-Eda used in this film, where it's just, again, this type of angle of the people, the dead people, talking about their memories, or just talking about, like when Watanabe is like, I don't know, I don't have a memory, really. And it's the moment where he starts asking our main character questions, and then the shots revert. Again, the shot doesn't move, it just cuts to another shot, but of the talking head shot on our main character. And to me, that was like, oh, fuck, now he's now got these questions, now he's got these thoughts, now he's the one thinking about, what memory would I take a memory? I guess how this does feel like, it's got the same type of vibe and feeling that I got after watching Pixar's Soul. I love the subtlety nature of it. I love the peacefulness, the peaceful melancholy. Or is it the melancholic peace? Peaceful melancholy? Peaceful melancholy sounds better. That's kind of like the term or phrase that I would probably use for Kore-Eda at this point, the peaceful melancholy. Both Maborosi and Afterlife do have a sense of melancholy and sadness about it, but also peace and contempt and tranquility, almost like, this is sad, but that's okay. But that's okay that this is sad. And I don't think many filmmakers promote that emotion enough. I don't think many filmmakers are like, it's sad, but it's okay to be sad. Pete Docter does, and it is currently it's probably past midnight right now, as I'm talking to you all right now, and I am going to head to bed. Cheers, and I'm going to continue my Kore-Eda journey in the morning, and I will see you all after Nobody Knows. So I'm about an hour and a half removed from my very first viewing of Nobody Knows, Hirokazu Kore-Eda's film from 2004. This is an interesting one in the sense of I'm still processing my thoughts and feelings about it. I obviously really like this film, but similar to Maborosi and Afterlife, I'm not sure how much I like it or why I like it as much as I do. His films deal within this melancholy piece, and one thing that really did dawn on me was with Maborosi, he did that with a person, I assume in their 30s, late 20s, 30s. Afterlife deals with those emotions when if you're elderly or of an older generation. And with Nobody Knows, he does this, he really emphasizes the peaceful melancholy within a story about children. And one thing that really connects with me with that is oh yeah, I think no matter what generation or what age you are, you're always going to have these moments of sadness, and people go through many different things. And of course, this film, Nobody Knows, isn't a ordinary thing that happens to children, in the sense of like, this isn't a thing where it's like, oh yeah, I went through that. I can't say that I related to Nobody Knows. I think this was the film from Kore-eda. I think this is Kore-eda's first film that I've been watching that I haven't related to, in a sense. But what I do like about the film is that it is still a very well made film, and it's done in a very authentically crafted way. It really is authentic in its presentation. The film is somewhat based off a true story from 1988 about children, about an abandonment of children. What's interesting is that I could tell from the very beginning that this wasn't all going to be peaches and cream. Similar to Maborosi, where how I mentioned when the husband walked off down the tunnel, I kind of knew to myself, oh, he's probably going to die here. With Nobody Knows, I had from the beginning, I had a suspicious feeling about the mother. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Did I think that she would just abandon the children? No, I didn't. I didn't think that. I thought it was going to be more of a story of neglect. I mean, it is, in a sense, it is a story of neglect, which I guess can be relatable to some people. But this is just the neglect on the extreme scale, to the point of like just outright abandonment. What I find interesting about this film is that, and one thing I think I've clicked on with Kore-eda's other films, is that the lack of score. And I know with Maborosi, I praised the score in that film, and it had a beautiful score. But with this film, what I noticed with Nobody Knows is that there isn't really any musical elements in this film. And I think that really works well with us just being soaking in the atmosphere in it. But when the music does play, it almost feels like a moment of joy and levity. And the cinematography is, once again, I mean, what I like about it, I'm saying what I like. There's not much that I dislike about this film, if anything, if I'm being perfectly honest, right off the bat. An hour and a half removed from the film, I don't quite have many things I dislike about it. But the cinematography, again, Kore-eda, he utilizes close-ups a lot more in this. This is so far his most cinematic film in terms of how it was shot. Kore-eda is using, for the most part, still stationary shots, still cinematography, not much movement. But what I find really cool is that the moment that he decides to really utilize movement and go handheld with it is the moment where all the children are out of the apartment. And it's like they're free. Like the birds fly the nest almost. And they're having fun. They're going around shops and they're just walking through the streets, and they're loving it. And Kore-eda makes the decision to have the camera off the tripod and moving with them and going down and, seeing their feet walking and tippy toes. And it brings a joyous wonder to it. It almost like has this reflection of like, as a kid, if you pick up the home movie camera and you're just kind of like, whoa, look, you're recording childhood family memories. And that's what Kore-eda does. Kore-eda goes from having these still shots that resemble our human point of view to then, when it becomes more wondrous, he takes the camera off to emulate a point of view that we have when we're watching back fond memories. With a runtime at 2 hours and 20 minutes, this could have very well have been places. There could have very well have been places in this film that could have dragged or been boring, but I didn't find that at all. I wouldn't cut a single thing from this film because there's a few subplots in this, but I think they all work fine. They all work really well, and they're all interesting. And obviously, a big subplot that kind of wove its way into the overall film was Akira befriending this schoolgirl who was also an outcast in her own right. And we don't get much of her, nor do I think we needed to. But we see Akira befriend this schoolgirl who is an outcast of school, who kind of joins these children, joins the family of these 4 children. Considering the topic of the film, about 4 children just getting abandoned by the mother, just have to fend for themselves, basically. There's no real sense of, like, everyone's against them. There's the people in the shop, that, help out when they can. Like, there's that one guy that gives food to Akira. There's that one woman who also talks and helps Akira out. The ending might be my favorite part of the film. The little girl, Yuki, ends up dying. And again, could have been Kore-eda deals with death in a very interesting way here, where she's clearly dead, but it's not, like, over dramatic. It's very, like, it almost took me a while to, like, register the fact, like, oh no, she's dead. Wow. Akira decides to take her to see the airplanes. And him and the schoolgirl he befriends puts Yuki in the suitcase that she came in when they moved to the house. Puts the little flip-flops as well that make the noise, which are absolutely adorable. They go on the train. They go to the airport. I forgot the name of it. Airport. They go to the airport. And they just sit and just watch the planes with Yuki in the suitcase, obviously, passed away. In a very, like, just lovely moment. And then Yuki gets buried. And then Akira and the schoolgirl go back on the train. And a song plays. It's sad. It's a sad scene. And then we fade to black. And in my head, I'm like, that's the ending. And then we fade back up. And we're not back for long. The scene that follows isn't a long scene. It's just now Akira, Shinguru, Kyoko, and the schoolgirl. So the now alive siblings, the still alive siblings. So everyone barring Yuki. The mother's still not home, still not there, but they get the food from the guy from the shop, and they walk, and they're together. Shinguru, the little boy, takes a coin from the phone box, and then they walk down the street. And then the film freeze frames on them, of them walking down the street. And again, it's not a long scene after the scene of Yuki's death, but the film could have very well have ended with Akira and the schoolgirl on the train. And the film could have ended there. And you could have, and it would have been, and the narrative would have been complete. But it would have been a very sad, depressing ending. But Kore-eda chooses to continue a little bit longer to be like, yes, this is really sad and hurtful, but they still get on. They grow from this pain. I read a book, Ikigai, and there's a moment there where they discuss Anti-Fragile, where you can get struck down, but you grow stronger from the damage. And that's exactly the message that Kore-eda, at least what I got from that Kore-eda was telling from Nobody Knows. It's like, you can get damaged. The worst things can happen to you, but you grow stronger from that. You gain experiences, you gain knowledge, and you grow from it. In the connection to the previous film that I discussed, Afterlife, how in Afterlife they needed to choose a memory that they wanted to take with them to the afterlife. It's almost as if that last scene of all the family together, even after Yuki's death, are strong and they're still getting on with it. It's almost as if that's the memory Akira would take with him. I'm not sure if that was intentional by Kore-eda, but that's kind of the impression I got with it. Just thinking about it there. But yeah, I think at the minute, I would give Nobody Knows 4 stars, 4 out of 5 stars. But this is a similar thing that happened with Afterlife. I might end up in a few days' time thinking about Nobody Knows and being like, wow, yeah, that's a much better flick than I thought it would be. But that's Nobody Knows. Excellent film. The next film to watch that I'm going to be going through will be from 2006, I believe, or 2008. The film Still Walking. Know nothing about it. Same thing with everything. So I'm looking forward to this. And yeah, I will see you all after Still Walking. So I'm about half an hour removed from my very first viewing of Still Walking, Hirokazu Kore-Eda's film from 2008, and so far, out of my Kore-Eda marathon, the most Ozu-like film that Kore-Eda has done, and according to the back of the Blu-ray of Still Walking here, from David Jenkins from Time Out, in the league of Ozu, and you can't ask for higher praise than that. And my very first thing that I can say about this is, in my opinion, I did get massive Ozu vibes. Not just the fact of it's like, oh, it's this calm film about family. Not just that, but especially more so of how it's structured. Of how my first thought was like, oh, I got late spring vibes from this film. And you could also sprinkle in Tokyo Story as well, but more so late spring for me. And why specifically late spring is, because I'm not going to spoil late spring. I'm just going to say, like, my experience watching late spring. It was that I was watching the film and I was enjoying it. I was settled into the atmosphere and I was settled into everything. And then the very final scene of late spring happened, and that was almost like the big crescendo of like, oh, and then it was like, then I felt it hit my emotions. And it was like, oh, the whole film was leading to that one last scene. And I felt a very similar thing with Still Walking. Still Walking had a moment, had just a very calm going about the day type of feeling from it all. And then the final scene came on screen of Still Walking, and then I just got chills because I was like, oh yes, that's what this is all about. That's everything that this film was leading to. And yes, the very first thing I am going to be talking about Still Walking is going to be the ending, because my god, it was the ending of like just the grandpa and the grandma walking up the stairs, and then the camera stops following them, and then they continue walking up the stairs until they go out of frame, with a voiceover by the lead character, played by Hiroshi Abe, saying that 3 years later, Dad died. I never got to go to a match with him, as in a football match. And soon after, Mum died. And I never got to drive her in an RV. And it's just moments like that where, God, yeah, because you always have these moments in films, I think, to where it's like, oh, I didn't get on with my parents, but, you know, after that one day with them, then I appreciate them so much more. And then I did that thing. I went to the football game with my dad, and I got an RV, and I drove my mum in it. No, it's not. But a lot like what Ozu does, and what Kore-Eda does beautifully in this film, it's a moment where it's like, yeah, we had that nice day. it was a nice day. Life didn't change because of it. And even after then, I still didn't truly connect with my family. And I'm going to get a little bit personal with this specific one, because although I do live in Hartlepool, the majority of my family, the rest of my blood family, they live down south. I very rarely end up visiting my family down south. And when I do, it is recently, within the last few years, when I have tried to very much so make an effort to see my family and be connected with them, because I am terrified of the thought of just kind of being very distant with family, only for one of them to go or something, and then I regret not being closer to them. And yeah, and this specific film, because the grandfather in this film, I can't remember, I don't know the actor's name, but he did brilliant. But all the acting in this film was fantastic, by the way. There wasn't one weak performance in it. But the actor who played the grandfather in this film was very, very, I got massive reminiscent vibes from my own grandfather, who did pass away in 2019. And again, ever since this pandemic, I've been a lot more appreciative and a lot more fascinated by slice of life films where we don't get these big grand things, but we just have we have experiences of the mundane, quote unquote. Because for a good chunk now, for over a year now, we haven't had that mundane that I have been attached to, that we all have been attached to, but we haven't realised we've been attached to that mundane until we can't do that mundane. And so films like this, I do value a lot. Because it is a moment where I can sit and watch a film, and I'm watching a fictional narrative, and I'm watching fictional characters in a location that I've never been to in my life, around people and characters that I don't necessarily fully relate to or I fully see myself in, but I watch these types of films, and I feel like I'm back in that type of normality for a moment. And especially with films like this that are centered around family, and not a family that are white picket fence, but not like dysfunctional, but family that are like, they're fine, and they're okay, but there's maybe someone who doesn't necessarily feel connected to their family, which is a situation that I do relate to. Unlike Kore-Eda's 3 previous films I've already watched, this one isn't a sad film. This is in fact his warmest film, I would say, so far. This is definitely Kore-Eda's most inviting film. There isn't a scenario. There is a story centered around death, obviously, and loss. It ends similarly to Nobody Knows, in the sense like it could have just ended with the voiceover of the main character being like, yeah, dad died and mum died, and then we faded credits. But no, we get a moment which is a beautifully done moment, where we see the main character and his wife still together, with the son older now, because I assume 16 years old, at the grave of the father and the mother, the elderly father and mother. And then you just see this little girl walk in a frame, and you're like, they had a daughter, they had a child as well. And it wasn't corny or sappy or anything. It was so, like, delightful. You're like, not only are they still married, but they had a child. And then we get the yellow butterfly thing as well, which I think was a wonderful moment. Very charming, very wonderful. And then we also then get the lovely piece of music that plays. And then they get in the RV. And it's like, he got an RV, he got a driver's license, he got an RV. And although, again, the whole thing was like, oh, I didn't go to the football game I didn't go to a match with Dad, and I didn't drive my mum in an RV. He still got a driver's license, and he's still got an RV. This is going to be the most rewatchable of his films, I think. I am going to revisit this a lot more. In the same way how I revisit Patterson, the Jim Jarmusch film, or Columbus, the Coconada film. There's just something nice and warm and inviting about this film, without being too sickly sweet. It's not sickly sweet at all. It's without being too, like, cheesy and naff. There is a niceness to this film. And I might end up walking away thinking this might be my favourite Kore-eda film within due time. Again, I'm less than an hour removed from seeing this film for the very first time, but that's my instant feelings about this, is that I do feel such a deep connection to it already. And this is a film that I would like to watch with my mum. I really would. If I had to pick like a favourite scene apart from the ending, it would be that beach scene with Hiroshi Abe and the father, and then with his stepson at the beach as well. That's it. Again, I can't. This is a film that I don't think I have many words to say other than what I've just said. It's a film that Still Walking is such like a. It feels so personal. And I think it is. Well, it is, because I looked up a little bit of trivia, and Kore-eda based this film very much so off his own family. And you can feel it. You can feel like he knows these people. You know that each of these characters are very much so real. And I don't mean like, oh, they feel real. It's like, it's almost like this is just a family anyway. This feels just like a family that I would know. Almost as such. It feels like a family that I feel like I relate very much so to this family. And each of the characters, I feel like I can relate to each of them in each of their stages. Like, I feel like I relate quite a bit to the young boy, Atsushi, I believe is his name, the stepson of the main character. I relate to him and him in his situation. Already I'm 26 and I already feel like I relate a lot to the main character, Hiroshi Abe. And I'm sure when I get older, I'm going to relate even more to him. And I'm sure when I become an elderly man, touch wood I get there, I'm going to relate to the grandfather. I'm not talking about the technical aspects of it because they're already well done as well, though. I mean, this film was like, again, Ozu drenched in the framing and the cinematography. This film, it was shot quite cinematically. It was made cinematically, and the acting was cinematic, but still very naturalistic. An amazing film. I can already feel this just amazing energy that this film has given off to me. And it was the pacing was amazing. It's an hour and 54 minutes, but I didn't feel it at all. It went by like that. I've watched shorter films that have felt longer than this film, but not only would I not cut anything from this film, I would have been happy if it went longer. I would have been happy if there was more in there. But then maybe I question if it was longer, would I have liked it as much? Because, it took place all in this one day. I love stories like that. I love films like that. With a bit of the next day as well. And I just feel like that's what makes it feel a lot more impactful. And yeah, I don't know. I feel a real deep connection to this film. This might be my favourite Kore-eda film so far. It's incredible. I can see myself rewatching this film as soon as next week. At the moment, I'm going to give this 4.5 stars. I'm not saying 5-star right now. That's not the feeling I got from it. Although I can very much so see myself giving this 5 stars. I'll say 4.5 at the minute. I was thinking I was like, should I give it 5 stars? 4.5 at the minute. Effortless. Just so that's the true word that I can say about the film. It's so effortless. What I mean by effortless, I mean it's so effortless from an audience point of view, from an audience perspective. It's so effortless for me to be into it, for me to relate to it, for me to connect to this film. Yeah, no, absolutely beautiful. I would go as far as say I adored Still Walking. I would say that. I would definitely say that. So that is the end of the Of Flesh and Blood box set from BFI. I'll probably give a read of the booklet in there as well. That would be interesting. However, we're not done with the Kore-Eda binge. No, not one bit, because he's got more films past this set. And one of them being Like Father, Like Son. Again, a film that I know nothing about. When did this come out? 2013? 2013. So this is 5 years after Still Walking. I am going into this again knowing nothing about it because I don't want to know anything about it. I mean, there's one here. At what point does a father truly become a father? I feel like I feel like this is going to be another very Ozu-esque film, but I don't know. Yeah, I will see you all after I've watched Like Father, Like Son. A little bit of an update on my feelings towards Still Walking now that I've slept on the film. I would probably I would nudge that rating up now, just from my gut feeling, my own opinions of it, from being 4.5 to now being a straight 5-star film. I think Still Walking is just, it's still with me. I adore that flick. But now moving on from Still Walking, I am now an hour removed from watching Like Father, Like Son for the very first time. And in the words of Sufjan Stevens, words are futile devices when discussing HIROKAZU KORE-EDA at this point, because especially with a film like Father, Like Son, what words can possibly be said about this film in order to praise it? It's unlike Still Walking, I don't need time to think on this film to feel like I am just straight up giving Like Father, Like Son 5 stars. This is Kore-Eda's film from 2013, and man, I'm going to say now 2013 is the best year. It's the best year in film. I don't care what anyone says. It is the best year in film that I have seen. The amount of 5-star films that have come from that year, man. And yeah, wow. I should probably say stuff about the film now. But I don't know what to say. I don't know what I can say. Other than I just absolutely adored this film. Out of all his films I have seen so far, I think this is probably his most accessible film. Including all the films from the Of Flesh and Blood box set that I talked about. But I do think, like, if you are trying to introduce someone who is more familiar with Western films, specifically films within the English language, and people are a little bit hesitant, and they may be a bit hesitant in terms of like, films with subtitles, why would I watch that? I think this is probably the most accessible of the lot, because all of his films, I think, are very indented into Eastern Japanese culture. I think especially a film like Still Walking is very, very Japanese oriented. But like Father, Like Son, I don't think it obviously has that, like, very Japanese quality to it. It's because it's a Japanese film, and Kore-Eda is very much someone who embraces that type of culture. But I do think that this film is very much so a story that an international audience can feel invested in to some extent. This is probably the best acting in a Kore-Eda film I've seen so far. Like, again, I know I've said this in Still Walking. Still Walking was phenomenally acted. And two different films, two different types of films. But I do think the performances in Like Father, Like Son are just like so incredible. I'm kind of good that I don't know any of the actors' names in this film, because all of them, both parents, both pairs of parents, they're so phenomenal, incredible. There wasn't a moment where I felt that I didn't feel where each of them were coming from. There was a moment, like, because this is again, Kore-Eda does this wonderfully. He takes topics and subjects that are very heavy and very, quite daunting topics to handle almost, and very, just heavy subject matters. And he takes them and he makes them truly real and relatable. Because a lot of the topics that he talks about are topics that we all are aware of. Either we have encountered or are aware of them. They're not unfamiliar topics, but a lot, like this situation, baby swapping, it's a thing that I'm aware of, and it's a thing that I know has happened and can happen. But I didn't expect the film to go that way. Like, when the film starts, that's another thing Kore-Eda does very well. When a film starts, this happened with Nobody Knows as well, where a film starts, and in my head I'm like, okay, this is probably going to be the type of film that we're going to get. And then, like, within the first 10 minutes, that gets changed almost. And I'm like, oh, this is the film. Because when the film started, I just thought, we're just going to get, like, a bit of a family drama with the father and son, with the father, the mother, and the son. That was my first impression. I thought to myself, is this just going to be, like, a drama about the parents and the child? But no, it's not that at all. It turns out that the son, Kieko? Can't remember the name. But the son is not the biological child of these parents. And you're just like, whoa. And then we get this other family brought into it. And it's, it's a bit of like different types of parents, different types of families. One of them's very, wealthy, quite strict, quite stern, like the father is at least. And then the other parents are a bit, they've got 3 children. One of them isn't biologically their own child. And they're a bit more they're working class. And again, it's a very familiar character dynamic that we've seen many times in films. Usually in comedies, that usually gets played a lot in like comedies or rom-coms or stuff like that. But this one, they really take those archetypes and those social class, and Kore-Eda really makes it like this not eye-rolling thing where it's like, of course the father's strict and he's got to learn to loosen up, or like, he's got to learn to drop his prejudices. His prejudice. Like, artists get their inspiration from things that they know from reality. So there's a reason why tropes exist, because there's, these types of people have existed and they do exist. And Kore-Eda takes those tropes and really makes it like an effort to be like, no, these are what these people are like. And more often than not, they just don't change. People just don't change. And I think that's really refreshing to see, is like, sometimes people don't change, but they evolve. And this is a heartbreaking film at times. Like, there was moments where I thought to myself, I'm going to cry here right now. I'm going to absolutely bawl crying right now. I didn't, but I came very close at the end. Oh, it's when Ryota, the main father that we first follow, is walking after his non-biological son. And it's that one scene, again, it's the scene where it's like camera's tracking Ryota just talking to his non-biological son, then it cuts to his non-biological son just kind of walking. Who, oh man, this kid as well, he gave me vibes of Jacob Tremblay in Room, like a child that you just want nothing but the best for. Someone that's just really, like, you just really want to embrace and care for. I'm someone who's very, like, I don't know about children, but seeing a child like Kyoko in this film makes me feel like I would want to be a father one day. Where Still Walking kind of is like, family's very fractured. And that's a blood family in Still Walking as well. Family together by blood relation. There's fractures in there. Even though the children aren't blood relatives of the parents, they were still grown up for 6 years being raised by these two people, which, at least from my perspective and from the perspective of the whole film, I think is more so, yeah, that means you're that means you're a father, that means you're a mother. And there's so many little things in this film, so many like amazing character arcs. Ryota has a brilliant character arc. The mother has a brilliant character arc. I think everyone in this film has a sensational character arc. But the point that I was trying to make was that the film inevitably ends was like, even though, yes, this thing started with two different families being broken apart, by the end, it's almost like two families almost have become one big family. That's almost what the impression I got from this was, like, this horrible thing that's happened inevitably has created a pretty strong bond between a group of people. Like, this family now, I mean, it's not shown the other two children that are in the film, but now that's like a family now. Like, again, this is the impression that I got, where, again, Kore-eda balances well with the concept of anti-fragility. Kore-eda is almost like the perfect anti-fragile filmmaker, anti-fragile storyteller. Excuse me. In the sense of, he takes topics that are painful, but they show the characters become stronger from it. And I appreciate that a lot. I really do. And this film, man, I think if I had to say, like, the closest vibes that I got from this film, again, it's a different type of story, but the vibes I got from it and the feelings, the emotions that I got from Like Father, Like Son are very comparable to Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story. Both of those films, I think, have a very strong just message and strong life lesson within it. I will put this, again, I'll probably put this on the same level as Still Walking for me, personally. They're both 5-star films. Both 5-star films. I'm not sure if I can pick a favourite. I really do think it depends on what I feel like. And that's the thing. I think Kore-eda, like, going into this marathon, in my head I was thinking to myself, Kore-eda is just going to be the modern day Ozu, where Ozu just kind of does these little slice of life films about family. And because I've seen 4 Ozu films, and they all have very similar structure and mentality. You go into an Ozu film, you know what you're going to get. And what you get is bloody brilliant and absolutely fantastic, but you know what you're going to get. Kore-eda has indeed done Ozu-like films, Still Walking being incredibly Ozu, but he's also very much so a filmmaker that sticks with his own style and sticks with his own creative voice, but while doing different types of films. I do feel like I've gained a new favourite filmmaker. I don't know of all time. I don't mean number one, but definitely top 10. Definitely top 10. His films are very... Again, I know I've just said, words are very futile in terms of discussing Kore-eda, but I do think they are. But this is just my very instant like feelings towards his films, and especially like Father Like Son. They're all just very special to me. And even when I don't connect to the story directly, or I don't have a experience in that story directly, like I've never, like, this isn't a situation that I've been through, but it's the actual human emotions that Kore-eda shows is what I really relate to, and I feel like I really do connect to. I've already discussed one specific scene and moment in this film that really just almost got me crying, which I always talked about. Where that was the other thing. It's like where he's talking to his non-biological son, and what I love so much is that scene ends where, because they're walking on two different pathways, and we then get with two single shots of like Ryota, Kyeko, and then that scene ends with a wide shot of two of them in frame at a crossroad when the two meet. It's simple, but man, it's effective. And that's a line, I think I'm paraphrasing what I'm saying this, but where Ryota goes, I was your daddy for 6 years. I wasn't a good daddy, but I was your daddy. And there's so many instances in life where you can take that type of thing and be like, I was this for you. I may not have been good, but I was that for you. It hits hard. It really does. The simplicity hits so hard with this film. There was the one moment where Ryota, his wife, and their biological son, who they now are having custody of, I assume. That's the thing that's happening. They're camping. And they're looking and wishing on a star, and everything's been wonderful. And it's so, they had a wonderful moment where Ryota finally was bonding with him, and they were on, like, you know, where the biological son called him father for the very first time. And that's when he knew. It was like, oh, okay, no, he's feeling like connected to me. And it's the moment where, you know, it's the all is great moment in a film where it's like, oh, they're all connected now. They're all one happy family, and they're enjoying it. Their biological son's loving it, and they're led in the tent. They're looking up to the sky. They're doing like a wishing on the stars. And the mother then goes, what did you wish for? And again, I'm paraphrasing, but the biological son goes, to be back with my mummy and daddy. And that's what he wished for. And then when he said it, he just covered his face with both of his hands, like he was being honest, but he didn't like the fact that he hurt them, and he apologized for that because he knew that still hurt them. Even though that's the other thing. He's not saying I want to be with my mummy and daddy. No, he says it because he still feels that way. He still misses these two people that he grew for the first 6 years of his life, have raised him. And he's missing them. But he's also grown a positive connection to his biological parents, who, yes, they're blood relatives, but they didn't raise him. They haven't raised him yet. And then Ryota goes, it's okay, and then pats him on the head. Like, that's a moment that really caught me, in the sense of, like, again, he's being honest. And he doesn't like, and he almost hates that he's being honest. And then a similar moment follows later where the mother, the Ryota's wife, I forget her name, I do apologize, where she goes, I feel like I love the biological son. And Ryota's basically, well, why are you upset? Why are you crying? And then she, again, I'm paraphrasing, but she basically goes, I feel like I'm betraying Kyoko at that point. Is that bad? Emotions, man. Honesty. It's complicated. And it can be painful. But the other scene that really, like, hit me was when Ryota was looking through his camera and all the pictures that Kyoko was taking. And then he broke down crying from looking at the photos. I don't feel like I need to say any more about that. You already know my emotions towards this film already. I don't need to break down why that scene is so impactful as it is. If you were to ask me right this second if I prefer Like Father Like Son or Still Walking, right now I would say Like Father Like Son, but Like Father Like Son is still very fresh with me. And both of them are very different types of emotions. Both emotional, but two different types of impact that I have from both of them. But I love them both. The last of the Kore-Eda films I will be talking about in this marathon video that I haven't seen. The next film that I will be discussing now will be Shoplifters. The very first Kore-Eda film that I saw this in the cinema back in 2018, and I haven't seen it since. So now I'm looking forward to watching this film for the first time in 3 years. Now, with the experience of watching his previous films that I've talked about. Yeah, not all of his films, but a good selection of them. So yeah, I will see you after I watch Shoplifters. And so here we are. We come to the conclusion of the Hirokazu Kore-Eda marathon that I've been doing. And we end it with Shoplifters. Unlike all the other films that I've discussed so far, I have already seen this film. I saw this film in the cinemas in 2018. The very first foreign language film that I have seen in the cinema, actually. So I remember it the film having a bit of a special place in my heart because of that. Coming out of it for a second time, I do really like the film. It's a film that hits harder almost knowing what already happened, although it still hits pretty hard even if you don't know what happens. And when I say hitting hard, I don't really necessarily mean emotionally, oddly enough. Or that's kind of like the description I've been using a lot for Kore-Eda's films, is this hit hard emotionally, especially the last two films, Still Walking and Like Father Like Son, where this one hits hard but more in a sad way. It's interesting because I was thinking as I was watching this film for a second time and now having watched his other films, this film almost feels like a culmination of the films he was making of the 21st century. Like, this was almost like he took everything he learned and everything he did from those films, from specifically Nobody Knows, Still Walking, and Like Father Like Son, took all of them and then made it into this film. In terms of my overall opinions on the film, I really like the film. The film's really good. Going into the film, I think I know I had it at 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. Coming out of it, I still feel 4 out of 5, which isn't a negative rating at all. It certainly isn't a negative rating. But it's almost like, considering I haven't given a Kore-Eda film in this marathon lower than 4 stars, I was slightly disappointed in myself, in the fact of, like, I didn't feel like because I was thinking to myself, oh, now I'm going to watch Shoplifters, And then I'm going to be head over heels for it. I'm going to absolutely adore this film. And I didn't adore the film, but I can further appreciate the film a lot more. It's weird because I don't think I necessarily came away from Shoplifters having a real personal attachment to this or a real connection as such. I think it really carries home the topic of the film excellently, in the sense of, and it does it wonderfully in the sense of, oh, what does make a family? And again, it's that towards the end of the scene where the mother character, she is in the interrogation, and she's saying like, and she's basically saying, what does that mean? Giving birth, does that make you a mother then, does it? And it's true. Again, I discussed it in like Father Like Son. You may not be a biological parent of someone, but you can still raise someone and be that figure in their life. I mean, step parents are a big example of that, where they might not be biological, but they can be there for you just as much, if not even more than actual blood. It's an interesting concept. One that oddly enough doesn't get discussed loads within film. The more just thinking about it there, it's a concept that's very profound and very like no, it's relevant. It's very, and it's known. Like it's very known in the world, but oddly enough, it just doesn't really get discussed about in film. I don't think. I haven't seen it necessarily get massively discussed in film, so that's interesting to me. And yeah, and this is one extreme version of it. I mean, this is one extreme version of step parenthood, or even adopted parenthood, which this leans more to adopted parenthood than it does step parenthood. That's another thing. This film is brilliant at playing with perception. Again, we're perceiving this film to be more like for the majority of it, a very happy, heartwarming tale, because our perception is just from this family, and our instant perception is, oh, this is a poor family, and we are and it's an inviting presence. It's not like it's like it's not like we're like, oh, I shouldn't be here. It's like, okay, okay, yeah, they're down on the luck, but hey, you know what? They're making it through. They're making through life. They're making it through this absolute awful situation that they're in. So as far as we're aware, it's like, these guys, they're just poor and they just have to shoplift. And we're in there. And they take in this little girl, Jury, who then they name Lynn. And they take in this girl because she comes from an abusive parenthood, an abusive household. So it's like, and to us, again, like the main characters, our instinct is like, no, take her in, keep her in this like warm family atmosphere. And there's moments where, it's when she first wets the bed and she keeps saying, I'm sorry, and then the mother has to be like, that's it, you don't need to keep saying sorry, it's fine. And, she's very quiet, and, she has a burn mark on her. There's everything there saying, like, where she came from was an awful, awful place. It was an awful place. So we're like, no, take her with you. This is a lovely, loving family home. And we're there for it. But then the perspective shifts when pieces start getting put together, and we'll realize, the young boy is not a blood relative. He was once someone that was also brought in the family, similar to Jury. And then when the whole perception gets flipped on and said when the police get involved, and then the film all of a sudden goes from being this Kore-EDA family film, a film about family, to a crime drama. Very small portion of the film. It's not like the whole. It's not like the second half of the film is this courtroom drama, but the police get involved, and then almost reality hits, and then there's cameras and there's everything, and then there's people being like, yes, the jury has been discovered. The missing girl who was kidnapped has been discovered, and now she's back with her parents. It's like, oh yeah, she was kidnapped. By a technicality, she was kidnapped. And then the whole thing about, oh yeah, the grandma's been buried underneath the house. And then my perspective is all of a sudden changed from being in with this family to then being almost a viewer of the news. And I'm like, God, if I was watching this on news, I would be horrified. I would be like, wait, what? This man and woman who once upon a time murdered a man started taking in children, and there's a dead old woman underneath the house. What? Like, from a perspective that almost becomes haunting, chilling, terrifying. But it never. But from the perspective we've been in for like an hour and 40 minutes, hour 50, the majority of the film, we're in with this warm family. So, in a sense, this film is incredible in terms of perspective and point of view, and how cinema can manipulate an audience's point of view. And at the end of the film, I don't think that this family, the two adults, the mother and the father, I don't look at them and go, what monsters. I look at them and I go, human mistake. They are mistaken humans. They are humans who have made mistakes. Again, you can look at it in the sense like, were they doing the good thing? Because, Yuri, who was renamed Lynn, she got away from a bad household, and she was a part of a loving place, but not legally. Same thing with the young boy. Yeah. Not only is this a good film about perception, but looking back at it, this is a good film about morals. And something may seem good and something may be good, but nothing's black or white. It's this grey area in the sense like, yeah, you are technically doing a good thing, but you also weren't doing a good thing. And just talk about that, I think Shoplifters does have a lot to it. This is a film very much so about, again, morals and grey areas, and that's life. HIROKAZU KORE-EDA is someone that documents life, and that's definitely something that definitely is something very apparent considering he started off as a documentarian. So he's someone that's definitely fascinated with life and capturing it in its most real way. Because there's so many films that are like, oh no, this is like real life, but it isn't. Because they end it in a way where it's like, oh well, we have to have this Hollywood, not even Hollywood, we have to have this very like fairy tale ending almost. And it's always a bit, It's like, the perception I would get is like, oh, that would be nice. Not, it's pure escapism. And, obviously there's films that we need escapism. And I love a lot of escapist type films. But it's sometimes really refreshing just to watch a film that's just a mirror of life. And it's interesting that Kore-Eda is someone that does that. Even with a film like Afterlife, which isn't a film very much more so spiritual than it is reality, he still holds a mirror up to life within that. And what I also find very interesting about Kore-Eda is that he's definitely someone who, I don't know, he just, this is what I can just base off the films I have watched from him. He has a complicated view on family and what makes family. And he is fascinated with connections, human connections. All 6 films I've discussed are all films about connection, human connection, and what it means to either lose that connection or create a connection. or both, lose a connection and then creating a new one, or losing that connection and the attempt to create a new one. This has been a fantastic experience for me. Obviously, I was going to watch these anyway, but I'm so glad I decided to do a video on this as well, purely because through just discussing this, just talking, verbalizing my opinions about these films, I've grown to appreciate them a lot more. I would still give Shoplifters a 4 out of 5 stars, in all honesty. But that's not negative. That's still not negative. I still gained a lot from this film. I just feel like I didn't have as much of a visceral connection to it as his other films that I've discussed. If I would have to give these a bit of a ranking, so there's 6 of these films, I would say, again, this is as of right now, 6, Nobody Knows, 5, Shoplifters, 4, Afterlife, 3, Maborosi, 2, Like Father, Like Son, and number 1 is Still Walking. Still Walking is probably my favourite HIROKAZU KORE-EDA film. But again, that can change. That can change, very much so. And I'm also aware that I've only covered a select few of Kore-Eda's films. One day, I would actually like to do a part 2, a second marathon, where I talk about his films. I Wish, Our Little Sister, After the Storm, The Third Murder, and The Truth. I think that would be an interesting marathon. With that being said, that has been my HIROKAZU KORE-EDA movie marathon. Thank you all for watching this. I hope you've watched this. If you've only watched a select few of these, let me know what you think is what are your opinions on Kore-Eda as a filmmaker? What is your favorite Kore-Eda film? And what themes do you gain from his films? I'm interested to see if other people have gained different themes from his films. Or have I just covered it all? Am I just that good? I don't know. Everyone has their different viewpoints because everyone experiences different things in life. And I'm going to stop there because I will get too far. Head in the description for links to the Instagrams and the Letterboxd. It'll be one letter. It'll be my Letterboxd. Follow me on there if you want to see what I'm watching on there. And yeah, there's nothing really else to promote right now. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone is safe. Thank you all for watching. And next time, just see you later and goodbye. Mic drop.